Hello, everyone. Eric Chappell, Civil Community Evangelist for Autodesk, and I want to thank you all for coming today for today's webcast. It's Advanced Road Design with InfraWorks, and I'm kind of flying solo today. Normally, I'm introducing another presenter, and then they take the wheel for the remainder of the hour. But today, I'm going to be your presenter as well. Now, I'm not totally flying solo because I do have Elliot Rosenfeld in the background, who's going to be fielding questions as they come in, and I'll talk a little bit more about questions in a bit. Um, if you're new to our webcast series, I want to welcome you. This is something we do twice per month, or try to, and we try to do it on the first and third Wednesdays of the month. And I have usually in parentheses there because, as is the case with this week, we sometimes are not able to meet that schedule exactly. But it turned out okay. We still got tons of registrations for today's session, so it turns out that Tuesday works well for folks as well. So again, appreciate you all giving an hour of your day to join us. The goal of the series is to give you information about our civil products and their features. Oftentimes we do this from the perspective of the product team because we know that those are the folks you guys want to hear from the most, the folks that actually make the software. It's also a chance for you to ask questions and provide feedback on whatever topic we're discussing. I'll even give you an opportunity in just a moment to suggest topics for upcoming webcasts. So, we really want to give you an opportunity to let us hear what's on your mind. Also, or in general, the goal of this webcast series, as it has been for almost 3 straight years now, has been to just bring you folks, the users of our software, a little closer to us, the makers of the software. And hopefully we've been doing that over the years. Our next webcast will be in 2 weeks. It's Wednesday, April 18th, same time, same place, 12 to 1. We're going to be covering what's new in Civil 3D and InfraWorks. You're going to hear from Dave Simeone and Sarah Cunningham, product managers for Civil 3D and InfraWorks, respectively. And you'll be seeing information come out on that in your email, and also on the various sites listed in the bullets on your screen, the community site, the forums, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and so watch for that announcement to come out in the next few days. As I said earlier, we love to hear from you as far as what you'd like to see in upcoming webcasts. So you can just use the questions panel as part of your GoToWebinar interface and just type in there, idea for upcoming webcast and tell us what it is. And we download all the logs from each webcast, and we'll keep that on file. And when it comes time to plan out future webcasts, we'll look to that as a reference and look at your ideas. So please share those with us. Most times you guys are able to come up with much better ideas for webcasts than we are, so we appreciate your input on that. I want to also draw your attention to our Autodesk Civil Engineering Community Center. The URL is civil-community.autodesk.com. This is an awesome central hub for everything Autodesk civil infrastructure. News channels through here, forums, the user forums, our gallery where you can publish projects that you're working on and kind of share them with the world and get feedback and kudos and answer questions about stuff you're working on. Lots of tips and tricks updated every day. The tips and tricks content is updated every day, so is the learning content. Same with news content as well. We feature a gallery project of the week. We feature ideas and forum posts from Civil 3D and InfraWorks. So there's something new up here every day. And in some cases, like the trending stream, it's updated, hourly. So there's always something new every time you come up here. Definitely a site you want to bookmark and visit regularly, daily, if not more often. It also has a cool search feature. So if you heard something, you heard there's an update for one of our products or a new release or a patch or something, you can go into the search feature at the top of the page and just search, and it'll search the recent posts, looking at kind of the most current information about what you're interested in. So that's cool too. Little disclaimer, I don't think we're going to get into this today. We may, but if I talk about anything that's forward-looking, like things we're working on in labs or in beta versions of the software, or anything in general that we're working on as far as functionality, Please know that there's no guarantee that anything we talk about that isn't actually in a supported released version of the software, there's no guarantee that it's going to be there until you actually see it in a released version of the software. So please don't make any purchasing decisions on anything that we discuss that is something we're working on, let's say. And that's what this big disclaimer is all about. I encourage you to ask questions. Elliot is a very capable question answerer. He knows the software very well, and he's, like I said, going to be watching the questions panel. So the more questions we have, the better the presentation gets. So please don't hold back and ask your questions. Unfortunately, we can't open the phone lines. We've got way too many people for that. But you are welcome and encouraged to use the questions panel in the GoToWebinar interface. So with that, I'm going to jump into my presentation, which is Advanced Road Design with InfraWorks. And strangely, I'm going to start off in Google Maps because I want to talk about an interchange area that I'm familiar with. I've got a bittersweet relationship with. This is Breezewood, Pennsylvania, and I grew up in southwestern Pennsylvania, and but I've lived in Virginia for, I don't know, over 15 years now. So I travel home a lot to see my parents, and every time I travel home, I have to use this interchange. So I thought this would be a great way to build something in InfraWorks that I would personally love to see, and a good real world project that we can look at. So let me tell you the problem, at least from where I see it personally. When I'm traveling home, I'm coming up Interstate 70. It's actually east, but it looks north here. So let's just call it north. I'm traveling up Interstate 70 north. And when I go to my wife's parents, my in-laws, we have to get on the turnpike here and head west on Interstate 76. And what I have to go through to do this is drive north until I hit a T intersection with US Route 30. There are traffic lights here, so I have to come up to this T intersection, deal with this traffic light. Usually there's traffic backed up all through here because there's a lot of trucking traffic. There's a major truck stop back in here. Over here is a truck stop. There are hotels, just a big cluster of commercial and just traffic everywhere. This picture doesn't do it justice because they must have taken this like on a Sunday morning or something. But anyway, I have to come through here, through a couple of traffic lights, and then get on this connector road and travel the whole way over here through the toll booth and eventually on to Interstate 76 where I head west. I've always thought that's a horrible setup. It's like I said, it's a traffic nightmare having to go onto this very commercialized road here to get from one interstate to another. Why isn't there a direct connection between Interstate 70 and Interstate 76? So that's what I'd like to work on today, is making this connection directly from 70 to 76, and I'm going to do it in this area right here. Now we don't have time. InfraWorks is fast, but we can't build an entire, build two complete interchanges in an hour. So I'm just going to focus on this side over here. So let me go into InfraWorks now, and I've built a model out of this, using Model Builder, and you can see it here. I'm in the master proposal, and let me just show you what I kind of ended up with the first time I ran through this. I'm switching to a different proposal, and you can see I've got one interchange here on the east, one on the west, and then in the middle is just a rough depiction of where the toll booth might be. We're going to focus on this interchange right here. Now I realize not all of you on the call are doing, highway projects, but I'm going to show you a lot of little tips and tricks and techniques and how things go together that I think are going to help you in all types of projects. Residential projects have roads, even commercial site projects have, access roads and things like that, where these tools are going to come in handy. So let's switch back to the master proposal. Oh, and one other thing I want to say about this. This was my first crack at this design, and I've done it a few more times since then, but one thing I realized that I did that wasn't very bright is I passed under the turnpike, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lanes, divided highway. I mean, these bridges that I would have to build are going to be really expensive. What I really want to do, and I'll just jump to another proposal here, is I want to cross over top of the turnpike so that I'm building a bridge that's for a 2-lane road rather than, you know, a 5-lane or 6-lane divided highway. Obviously going to be a lot less expensive. The other thing I did is rather than travel through this valley over here where I could go under the turnpike, I decided to come up here on the ridge line where I could travel. I'd already be elevated and it would be easier to travel over the road. I'm just sharing like my thinking as I'm going through this, remembering also what InfraWorks is intended for, right? We're in the early part of the project. We're doing proof of concept. We're trying to maybe do a couple of different alternatives of how we might design, in this case, an interchange. So this isn't going to be, you know, designed to the finest detail, but we do want to get something that would work and that looks good, and so that's going to be our goal. All right, so I'll switch back to master view or master proposal, and I'm going to make a new proposal out of that one to get started. So I'm literally starting from scratch here. I'm going to call this, I think I'm up to design 5. So let me go ahead and type in design 5. And now we've got an identical proposal to master, but it's called design 5. A good rule to follow is to keep your master proposal intact, and when you want to do design, just make a duplicate of it and do your design in there. All right, the first thing I'm going to do is get rid of my planning roads that represent the turnpike here. And yes, I know I can right-click and convert this to a component road, but I really don't want to because it's got all of these vertices, and I have this really nice sweeping curve here that I'd like to define, you know, with geometry that is representative of the long sweeping curve. And also, because I've got the new element-based layout, it makes this really easy. So I'm just going to wipe these guys out, these planning roads. The other thing I want to do is this is currently being depicted as 2 individual roads, and I want to depict it as 1 divided highway. So all I'll do next is go to my roadway tools. I'll click my component road tool. For my assembly, I'm just going to use something simple here. I tend to gravitate toward this 2-lane as a starting point when I kind of don't know what my next step is. And watch how nicely this element-based road design works. Notice I'm switched here to element-based. When you install a new version of InfraWorks and you go to draw your first road, it's going to default to PI-based. So you have to come up here and click it to element-based. But then all I have to do, I'm going to define this tangent first. Click a point along the tangent. It automatically assumes that I want to do a curve and jumps right into this curved section of the road. It's not a perfectly defined depiction of the curve. That's because of my inaccurate clicking, and I can fix that. I'm just going to double click right here, but I've got a tangent with a curve. The next thing I'll do is I'll click on this gizmo here for this tangent. I'm going to hold down my shift key and drag it northward, and the reason I'm holding the shift key is because it keeps it aligned with the tangent and won't let me swing it left or right. It keeps that original alignment, and I'll just swing it into position so it's splitting that median. That looks pretty good right there. All right, so now I've got a nice geometric representation of that existing road. So, you know, rather than convert it, I just erased it and redrew it. You know, my ultimate goal is to have a component road here that I can tie into and take advantage of all the, you know, the intersection capabilities and all that, so that I'm intersecting, you know, component roads with component roads. Now, my next challenge is I've got a simple 2-lane road here, and what I need is a divided highway that has 3 lanes. It's actually eastbound, but I'm going to call it northbound. It has 3 lanes eastbound, 2 lanes westbound. What I would do is, you know, sit down and add my components, right? So I'd right-click, insert road component, add a median, add a lane, add more lanes on the left, and, you know, get it all built out. To save a little bit of time, what I did is I did that earlier. In one of my several times that I've done this, I saved my road as an assembly, and I'm going to show you how to do that later on with a simpler road. So this will save you from having to sit there and watch me build this out component by component. But what I'll do here is say road assembly, replace assembly, and I've got one in here called Route 76. I tried it, got it a few different times here. Number 3 was the charm, so I'll just click that. Drop my assembly on here, and then you can click and drag this assembly insertion to define where you want it to start and end. In my case, I want it to be the full length of the road, so I'll click the gizmo here and I'll say align to start of road and align to end of road. Now, based on my experience with teaching this stuff to other people, to some people that's a trick. They didn't know you had that align to start of road and align to end of road. I'm going to press enter there, by the way, to finish the command. So, the way I'm going to run the webcast today is I'm just going to build this thing and tell you what's in my mind while I'm building it, realizing that some of the things you may already know, and some of the things may be tips or tricks to you that you didn't know. And hopefully we'll pass along a lot of information. So you can see now I've got my nice 5-lane divided highway. It's got paint stripes, it's got shoulders, it's got the grass median, and I'll tell you a little bit about how to build that individual stuff a little later. But I've got a nicely defined depiction of my turnpike here that I can tie into. So next what I'll do is I want to define my road along this ridge line. Now, it's pretty easy to see where the ridge line is, but just to make it a bit easier, I'm going to take away my aerial imagery. Now that I've used it to define where the road is, I can remove it. Now, if you had the road surveyed, you could certainly, if you had that center line in Civil 3D, you could certainly bring that in and have an exact location of where the turnpike center line is. You've got especially if you've got the AEC collection, you've got Civil 3D at your fingertips. You can accurately define geometry in there and bring it in here. Or you could also do what I did, which is maybe more typical of early on in the project where you haven't done a survey yet. You're just maybe doing some proof of concept or some studying for the DOT to see what might work here. So anyway, as I was about to do, I'm going to turn off the aerial imagery. So what I did is I promised you I would share my thoughts as I worked. I went into my orange basic InfraWorks toolbar here. I clicked the cube icon and then went into surface layers. And from here I can turn off my imagery and click OK. I'm also working in engineering view, which takes out the sky and the shadows and things like that. One thing I did though is the default kind of setting for engineering view is to have the high visual quality set to low. And I thought since this was a presentation, I'd want things to look a little sharper as I worked. So I switched that to high visual quality, and I'll show you the difference here. If I switch it back, the lines get a little thready. Things aren't quite as sharp. So I thought just for you guys today to make it look good, I would switch to high visual quality. But for just working on my own, where I'm the only one that's seeing what I'm doing as I work, I would probably keep it at low visual quality so I get the highest, the highest performance and speed out of the model. All right, so now I can very clearly see where that ridge line is. So I'm just going to come here and launch my component road command. Once again, I'm just using that 2-lane style. I'm going to come from over here somewhere, maybe do a little curve up this way, a little curve back, a short tangent, a curve back the other way. Gotta love this component or this element-based layout. I'll come across this way, start my big sweeping curve here, a tangent, another curve, and then I'm being deliberate about tying into the turnpike with a tangent here. And let me just double click that and I'll kind of explain what I mean. A couple of things about what I just did. First of all, notice that I tied into the center of the turnpike, even though in your mind you might think I need to tie into this right lane because that's what I'm merging into. Roads intersect center line to center line in InfraWorks, so that's where you need to double click on if you want to tell InfraWorks that you want an intersection. Another reason I used a tangent is because, and this is a good thing to demonstrate something you may or may not know. I'm going to do just a really quick component road here. A really quick intersection just off to the side so we can talk about it. And another thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take away the left lane, okay, the backward flowing lane. Now look at what happens. Right now I'm intersected at a pretty sharp angle, but let's switch that to roughly 90 degrees. Okay, and look at what you get. You get yield lines and traffic arrows. This looks like your standard, 90-degree intersection, a one-lane road, maybe in a town intersecting with a, two-lane road with traffic going in both directions. But if I swing this around and make it a sharper angle, InfraWorks is smart enough to say, wait a minute, that looks a lot like a ramp. And it automatically takes away all of the yield lines. It adds an acceleration or deceleration lane depending on the configuration, and automatically adds that widening. And of course, if you know anything about widenings, you know that you can grip those gizmos and stretch out the length of the acceleration part, the length of the transition, and so on. So we're taking advantage of the fact that when you intersect two roads together and one of them is only going in one direction, you automatically get this ramp configuration. Let the tip here is let InfraWorks do that for you. Now, you might be wondering then, what in the heck's going on here? That is one nasty looking thing. Well, what I haven't done is I haven't taken away this lane that's heading in the other direction. So this looks like some really ugly conglomeration here until, and this is the trick, and this is where people can get tripped up. They draw this in with InfraWorks, they see this and say, oh man, that is not at all what I expected, and maybe something a little harsher than that. But you got to understand what you're asking InfraWorks to do. And all I have to do is pull this lane back so that it gets out of play in the intersection. And then magically, I have a very nice ramp interchange, and I didn't have to do squat for that. InfraWorks recognized that I was intersecting at a sharp angle with a lane going in one direction. It automatically added the acceleration lane in this case. I can adjust the geometry. I'm going to make that transition longer. I'm going to make the acceleration area itself longer. And now, I've got a nice ramp interface there. Even the, I don't know that you'd have an arrow there, but it's pretty consistent with what you'd have. And all I had to do was simplify it to the point where it kind of makes sense. You wouldn't intersect a ramp with traffic going in both directions. It's only going to go in the flow of traffic of the main road. Something else that might throw you off is, I wanted to create an overpass here, but instead I've got this really kind of crazy looking intersection. And just realize InfraWorks kind of did what you told it to do. You crossed over one road over another at the same grade. It's going to try to create an intersection, and it actually did a pretty darn good job. It created the yield lines. It realized that there are multiple lanes of traffic, put all the traffic arrows in there that you need. But it turns out that's not really what you want. You want to do an overpass here. So to make that happen, I just simply need to elevate my ramp road, we'll call it, or connector road, up over the turnpike road. So all I got to do is select the road and swing my view down so I'm looking at it to where I can see the PVIs. A PVI was created automatically at the intersection. That's what InfraWorks does. And I'm just going to click that and drag it backwards along the alignment of the road. Drag it to about right there. And then I'm going to make another PVI on the other side of the road. Just right-clicked on the center line, and that adds my PVI for me. And then if I look at my elevations, and this is maybe one of the simplest but best tips I'm going to show you today. All I'm going to do is place my cursor on the road, on the turnpike road, the existing road, under or near the bridge. And I see down at the bottom left corner, right down here, my elevation is about 1421. All right. And then if I look at these PVIs, this one's at elevation 1421. It's really low. This one's at elevation 1443. It's pretty high. It's about 20 feet higher. So 20 feet's a pretty good place to start with, I think, with an interstate bridge to take care of the underpass clearance and the actual thickness of the superstructure and all that. So I'm going to leave this one where it is, and I'm going to bump this one up to 1441. And you can even get under there with your measurement tools and, and measure the clearance. But that'll get my one road elevated above the other. And then all I have to do is add my bridge. So one of my bullet point items in the description for the webcast today is creating an overpass. And that's as easy as it is. You cross one road over the other, you elevate it using your PVIs, and then you add a bridge. Okay. Now my pier here is a little bit in a dangerous place, so I can either make the bridge a little wider, or I'm just going to click the pier and move it. I'm not sure why it moved just that part. Let's try that again. Here we go. Put it right about there. And now I don't have to worry about traffic running into my pier. And I can check clearance here with my measurement tools. All right. Something else I'm noticing, and there isn't. I wouldn't say there's a step-by-step procedure to this. Do this first, and this second, and this third. Just as I'm working on this, I'm seeing things that maybe I don't like or need to fix. I notice that my slopes here go out a certain distance and then end and drop straight down. And I know just from knowing the software that has to do with my grading settings for the road. So I'm going to click the road, go over here to grading, and I noticed that my grading limit defaulted to 32.81 feet. Well, that's not enough for this 3-to-1 slope to daylight. So I'm going to need to give it more distance. Maybe I'll try 150 feet. All right, I'll just type that in and press enter. And now everything should tie into existing ground as I would expect it. Also, while I'm here, I'm going to change the grass. I'm going to change the cut and fill material to grass. And I always like to use this under terrain. You've got these grass styles here that are scale dependent. I always like to use those because they look good no matter how closely you're zoomed in or zoomed out. You can kind of see the difference here with the median material. You can see how it has that tiled appearance. Actually, I think this might be scale dependent too, but with my slope material, it actually changes and it looks good no matter how close or how far away you're zoomed in. Now, while I was zoomed in closely there, I noticed that this PVI is pretty harsh. And if I take a look at it, you'll notice there's no vertical curve there. So I'm just going to right-click that PVI and add a vertical curve. It's going to add a really short one, I think. No, actually, that's a pretty nice vertical curve. Now, that does make the bridge more complex. The fact that the vertical curve actually runs into and takes up part of the bridge. I might want to pull my PVI back away from the bridge so that I don't have that condition. I can certainly do that if I want. This PVI is kind of sharp, so I'm going to lengthen that curve a bit. So I'm just working my way through it as I go. Things are looking pretty good. All right. I want to see if I can tighten this up a bit because my big sweeping curve is pretty far from the turnpike. So I'm just going to click this curve gizmo here and pull it in a little closer. That's pretty easy to do. And that's looking pretty good. Okay. So now, so far, I've got access for people that come off of Interstate 70, which is here. Eventually, I would make an interchange over here, and they would come along this road, across the turnpike, come back around, and enter in an east or northbound, we'll call it, acceleration lane, and get onto the turnpike and head in that direction. Okay. Now I want to make a place where people heading north or east on the turnpike can exit and come back around and over the bridge. So to do that, I'm going to create another component road. And this time, instead of a 2-lane road, I'm just going to go over here and pick a lane. Now, I've racked up some assemblies in here, so I am going to type in the word lane, and that'll narrow down my choices, not much, but enough to where this lane component comes in here. Now, a single component and an assembly, they're kind of the same thing. So, and that's going to become important in a bit, but they're kind of interchangeable. An assembly can be a single lane, and that's all I'm doing right here is adding a single lane. So I'm going to pick a point near the center of my main road, my turnpike. And as you do this, you'll kind of get better and better at knowing like where to pick things. But I'm going to come out at an angle, make a little curve, and then tie in to the center, double click to my other road. And hopefully I get a good intersection on both sides, and I do. Now notice I've got this weird, it's trying to come around and turn left. I certainly don't want that. So I'm just going to take this lane and drag it into the intersection here. And that should clean that up quite nicely for me. Okay. Now, I will tell you, it's great that that happened because I'm doing a webcast and I would love everything to go smoothly. But I can tell you that sometimes you don't get what I just got. Sometimes, and I kind of hope it happens later on in the presentation. But sometimes this intersection, this one back in here, it won't figure itself out, and you'll just get one road overlapping the other. And you kind of have to go and grab the gizmo and bump it around a little bit. You may have to go into 3D view and take this PVI at the end and slide it up and down to get the intersections to find themselves. And the same thing with with dragging this lane back. Sometimes I go a little too far or not far enough, and I get something that looks pretty funky in there. You have to realize that you're asking InfraWorks to do a lot. It's calculating the horizontal and vertical solution for the intersections of the roads all at one time, calculating slopes and everything. And it's a pretty complex solution to come up with. So sometimes you have to give it a little bump here or there to give it a chance to figure itself out. So again, just telling you what's on my mind as I'm working. I see that sharp drop off here again, so it reminds me that I have to fix up the grading. So I'll use that same grass material. I'll extend my grading limit out to 150 feet. And that's going to clean up my slopes a little better for me. But I've got a pretty nice looking set of ramps going in there. Something else I noticed is that we've got some pretty harsh change in elevation. This one isn't too bad. This one here is really bad. You can see this very severe bump up here. And what's going on there is you really usually, oh, this is a really good example of it here. So what's going on here is the road is intersecting way, way over here. So it's grading, straight from this PVI to whatever PVI is next. It looks like this one here. And because of that, it just so happens that the road lands way below the existing road up here. So it has to make up that elevation difference rather quickly. So a way to fix that, and I'm just going to do it right here, I'm going to add a PVI. Now, what elevation do I set that PVI at? I'm going to come up here and set my cursor to maybe a point across from it on the main road. I'm seeing 1445.66. Sounds good to me. So I'll go ahead and add my PVI right here. Once my PVI shows up, I'll click on it, enter 1445.66, and that's going to bring that elevation of the road up to where it needs to be. All right, so I don't have that massive jump in the road. It looks pretty darn smooth now. All right, and I can do the same thing here. Just grab an elevation off this side, apply it over here, and that would make that smoother for me. All right, so we've got half of our interchange done. We're able to get off of the turnpike and onto the connector road, and we're able to get from the connector road onto the turnpike, northeast bound, we'll call it. Before we jump to the other ramps, which will connect here and here, I'm going to fix up some things on this ramp. So right now it's just a single lane. We don't have any stripes, we don't have any shoulders, so what do we do about that? We certainly want it to look better than that. So I'm going to click on the road, and I'll right click and say Insert Road Component. And the first component I'd like to do is a white paint stripe. Okay, so as I look through the out-of-the-box components, I don't see a white paint stripe on here. So what I've learned to do is use a curb component. So I'm going to grab this curb and I'll just drop it over here, just a piece of it. And as you might guess, it looks like a curb. It's got a reveal to it, it's made out of stone, so on and so forth. I want a stripe. So I'm going to click that curb, and over here on its properties, the first thing I'll do is change its width. I'm going to do 0.33. That's as narrow as you can go with a curb. So if you're using 3-inch stripes, unfortunately you can't go down to 0.25. You got to use 0.33. I'm going to use 0.5 for the depth below and also for the depth. So I'm going to set those values equal. And I'm going to say I don't want any deflection to the curb top. And then the last little trick is I'm going to go to my material and pick the color white. And now I've got something that looks a lot like a white paint stripe. Now it does have a 1/2 foot depth. If you wanted to get, if you wanted to make it a really thin depth, you certainly could, but then you'd have a gap underneath. If you're thinking about quantities and that sort of thing, there is a narrow strip there, but in any case, I've got the stripe represented. So the thing about that, there were a lot of steps to that. I had to bring the curb in, I had to set its width, I had to set its material, 2 values on the depth. I don't want to do that over and over and over again every time I want to add a stripe. So how do I make a stripe component, right? If I, again, look over, if I click the Component Roads tool, I don't see, there isn't a white stripe in here, at least not out of the box. So here's a big trick for you. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a component road. I'm going to create one out of a curb. All right, just a little piece of one right over here. And I'll do all the stuff I just did, right? You have to watch it one more time. I'm going to set the color to white. I'm going to set the width to 0.33. Depth below to 0.5 and depth to 0.5, and turn off apply deflection to curb top. Okay. Then, so there's my stripe. It's very weird. I've got this road which is a stripe. But what I can do now, I can click that quote unquote road, right click and say road assembly, add to library. Remember I said earlier that anything can be an assembly, even a single component. So I'll go ahead and just click a point on there. I'm going to call this white stripe. Now I've done this a few times, so I think I'm up to 4. Press enter, and now I've got a stripe in my library. I can delete that. I can go over to my road over here, my ramp, right click, insert road component. If I scroll down probably near the bottom, there's my white stripe 4, and you can see I've done it actually 2 more times before that. So now I can click that, drop it in over here, and I've got a white stripe. All right, now something else I might want on my ramp here are some shoulders. So I'll select the ramp, right click, insert road component, type in the word shoulder here. There we go. I'll drop this in outside the paint stripe. And this I'd like to see 3 foot in width. And I don't like the lighter color on the pavement. It looks kind of weird. So I'm going to change that to a darker asphalt color. And you could do the same thing, if that's the style of shoulder you like, 3 feet with darker asphalt, you can do the same trick I just did. Draw a road to the side that's nothing but that shoulder, set up the parameters you like, and add it to the library as an assembly. I'm going to go ahead and do another shoulder over here. And again, I'll make it 3 feet, darker asphalt. And now, because I know I'm going to have other ramps in this project, I'm going to select this road, right click, actually selected in a little too far there. I'm going to right click and say road assembly, add to library. I'm going to click the point where I'm right over the shoulders, full width of the shoulders and the paint stripes. I'm going to call this ramp, I don't know, let's call this ramp X. I don't know how many ramps I'm up to in here right now. But now we can not only capture individual components, but kind of what the assembly capture was designed for. The idea is to capture the whole width of the road and all the components, not just one, although it works great for either one. All right. So now what I can do is I can apply that assembly to my ramp here. So just to show you how it works, I'm going to right click and say delete component. I'll take this stuff away. Do the same thing with my paint stripe here, delete component. Delete component. And then I can right click, road assembly, replace assembly, find my ramp X, there it is, drop it in. What I usually do is just drop it in and kind of see how it looks, press enter. Something to know, sometimes you have to press enter, and sometimes you have to just click off the road somewhere to get it to kind of take hold. But now that I have this, I can click these individual components and stretch them to where they need to be. Now this is where things can get a little interesting. Sometimes you need to stretch the component the whole way into the intersection, which is what I did with the stripe. And you'll get a nice merging of the two components. Okay, so that worked well. The shoulder, let's see how that works. I'm going to do that with the shoulder. Again, I'll click off the road and I can see that. Now the shoulders look good, except they are different widths, so you'll see a little bump right there. Now over here, it may not work quite the same because of the different direction of the flow of traffic. I may have to zoom in pretty close to pick that stripe component there. There we go. So let's see what happens if I pick this stripe component and drag it the whole way into the intersection. What's going to happen? Not good stuff, right? We've got this stripe that's just randomly going the whole way through. So there are some cases where dragging it the whole way in is a good idea, and some cases where, I think I picked the grading there. Oh no, okay. Some cases where you kind of want to end it where the before the intersection happens. All right. So that's a little more like what we want. And then same thing here. I can click and drag these components to back to whatever makes sense. So I think on this side it's going to make sense to pull the stripe the whole way around. I'm getting low on time here, so I need to move on. But you get the idea. Actually, what I'm going to do with this one, I'm going to click it and say align to start of road. And I'll do the same thing with the shoulder here.
Hey, Eric.
Yes, Elliot.
Sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to ask if you could try to zoom and pan a little bit less. I think our bandwidth is causing a little bit of lag for some users.
I will do that.
I know that's hard to kind of keep in mind, but thank you very much.
Okay. Thanks, Elliot. Okay. So by making that stripe and shoulder go the whole way to the beginning, I'm on my way to defining the two-lane portion of the overpass as well. Okay. So let me put my last two ramps in. Those are pretty quick and simple. And this time, I'm going to actually use the assembly that I created. I think it was called Ramp X. Ramp X. So making those assemblies is really a time saver, really handy. And for this, I'm just going to click near the center of the road. I've got a pretty big elevation jump here, so I'm going to make this nice and long. So I'll click near the center here, little curve, and then a tangent here. And I'm using that ramp assembly, so it's it's all going in the right direction. Now here's an example of where sometimes your intersection just doesn't work out. You can see that it didn't merge. It didn't figure itself out there. So I'm just going to drag it, try a different spot. I'm going to look at the vertical. You can see that for some reason, it dove way down on the vertical here. It's got a lot of stuff it's trying to do. So I'm going to pull this cube up to where the elevation matches on the existing road. Maybe that'll get it figured out. That's still not doing it. I'm going to come back here a little bit. And there we go. So now we've got an intersection that we can work with. All right. And look at how great that ramp looks because we've added, all the striping and the shoulders and everything were built in automatically to the assembly that we used. And then we've got one more here. And when I've done this in the past, I didn't have this weird serpentine thing going on here. So this may get a little weird. Let's do this. A little curve and a tangent. Notice again that I'm tying into the center line. Double click to tie into the center line. And we got two great intersections there. Also remember that you've got lots of gizmos to work on the geometry. If you want exact values, again, I think it's kind of overkill to get too picky about values here, but if you wanted this to be exactly a 300-foot curve, you could always click the tooltip and type it in. You do have control over the geometry here. All right. So that's how you can leverage the capabilities of InfraWorks to build an interchange. And just to show you another cool thing about the element-based layout, now that I've built this much, if I wanted to continue designing the rest of the road, I'm going to remove these horrible connector roads that are here now, and I'm going to take advantage of the bridges that are already here and pass under them. The nice thing now is I can start my component road command and just jump right off the end of this road here and start doing my thing. All right. And it will just continue that cross section, that assembly along the extended version of the road. So that's pretty cool. So there's some other things I wanted to show you that were on the list, quantities and site distance and going to Civil 3D. So very quickly I'm going to go through those things. Fortunately, InfraWorks makes this stuff pretty easy. So for example, if I want to do cut and fill quantities, I can actually just click the road and launch cut and fill and hit the play button, and it will give me my cut and fill values. I can also hold down my control key and click other components. So I've got my additional 3 ramps as well. You can see everything highlighted in blue is what's being calculated for earthwork. Now I need to hit play again. And you'll see that it'll calculate earthwork quantities for all the areas highlighted in blue. Now it doesn't work, you need to know that it doesn't calculate quantities in intersection areas when it comes to like material quantities, pavement, curb, and so on. And that's kind of a bummer for an interchange design because a lot of what you do is intersection area. So you can see now the blue highlighting tells you kind of what's been, the stuff that's not highlighted in blue is what's being left out of this quantity calculation. So not as effective for an interchange design as far as material quantities go. So that's how easy quantities are. Basically just click and hit the buttons on the stack and you're good to go. Let's look at sight distance now. I want to see if I have any sight distance issues on this road. So I'll click the road, click my little scale icon up here, and then sight distance. Over on the right, I've got my sight distance panel. Right now it's only going to do the one lane because there's only one lane that's complete for the whole road. So I'll go ahead and click Analyze. And what we're looking for are any red or orange areas that pop up. And we can see one over here. And I think because that's so far into the intersection, we're not going to worry about it. Now, in past times I've done this, and maybe we'll see it on one of the other roads. Let's try one of the other roads. Let me click this guy and hit Analyze. See if any red areas pop up. Yeah, that's what I was expecting. So remember earlier when we had to fix the little PVI issue near the interchange, near the ramp, and here we see it very clearly. We've got this, let me close down analysis here. We've got this very sharp jump up to from one road to the other, and that again is because it's tying in really far away in the center of the road, and the next tie-in point is way back here somewhere. So we need to add a PVI to kind of smooth that out. So again, I'll hit the sight distance. You can see we've got this horrible sight distance problem here. We've got more problems than just sight distance there. Well, let's fix it and then see if the sight distance problem goes away. So I'll close this down. My elevation here is about 1425/75. I'm going to add a PVI. I'm going to set its elevation to 1425/75, about the same as the road I'm tying into right across from it. And then let's see if we have a sight distance issue now. I'll click Analyze. No problem, it goes right through. Now we're seeing another, not sure what that one's all about. We still have a little bit of a crest there. So maybe I'll drop that down just a little bit. Let's go to 1425 even. And we'll hit Analyze one more time. Oh, still have a little bit of a sight distance issue there. But at least that tells me, it looks like it's where we're intersecting with the lane. So what we may have to do here is continue working on this profile. Maybe add a PVI here and elevate it upward a little bit so we can see over that little hump. And then keep running the analysis until we get that area cleared out. All right, so that takes care of quantities, that takes care of sight distance analysis. What about going to Civil 3D? So what I can do here is the first thing I want to do is make sure my roads are named. That's going to make life easier for me in Civil 3D. So I'm going to call this Turnpike Connector. Oop, add an extra E on there for some reason. And then I've got a few ramps that I want to register in here. So looking at it this way, I'm going to call this my northeast ramp.
We had a question come in while you were showing the quantities that I actually didn't know the answer to. Do you know if it's possible to view the quantities for all of the component roads in your model?
Yeah, you just have to select them all.
Great. Okay. That was
So
simple.
yeah, I don't know if that's possible. If it's possible to select them all in Model Explorer, but I mean typically you don't have hundreds of them, so it would probably be easier to just hold that control key down and do multi-select, or you've got a number of selection tools you can select by window and stuff like that. But yeah.
Yeah. And that was actually a follow-up question. I think you may actually be able to right-click on a feature class in Model Explorer and do a select all,
Yep.
or view in data table and select from there.
Yep.
Great.
Okay, so we've got southwest ramp, and then we'll call this southeast ramp. The reason I'm being so careful about naming is because if you bring a bunch of different roads into Civil 3D, it becomes easy. They're named just by number, and it becomes really easy to pick them out then when you actually see the names. So all I'm going to do now is now you can go into InfraWorks and say open InfraWorks model and actually browse to the SQLite file and all that. I actually prefer, even though it works just as well, to just export an IMX out of InfraWorks like this. So I'm going to export an IMX of my design, give it a place to go. You can see I've got one here already called Turnpike Connector. I'll just call this Turnpike Connector 2. And I'll hit export. Notice my coordinate system, PA 83 south foot, and then I've got a Civil 3D drawing over here. Give that a second to export. And I'll go to my Insert tab, open InfraWorks model. Now by default, it will want to browse for a SQLite file, but because I've done this before and picked IMX, it's going to default to the IMX format. Okay. So I'm just going to grab this. I'll grab number 2 since that's the one we just created. Click, and I want to refine my selection set. I don't want to bring in everything in the box that I created. So all my dialogues are on a different screen today. So I'm not going to bring in any terrain surfaces except InfraWorks existing ground. I don't want any planning roads. And as far as design roads go, I only want, I'm not sure what that one is, but I only want my ramps and my turnpike connector. And I'm going to go ahead and bring in intersections as well because I may want to use some of that intersection geometry when I'm actually building intersections. Notice also our one bridge is here. And by the way, that's another reason why I changed the style or the makeup of the turnpike road to one road, is because it's a lot easier to make a bridge under a single road than 2 parallel roads. So go ahead and hit open model, and that stuff's going to jump in. And now you can see all my alignment geometry. You can see the bridge. Take a look at that in 3D. It's very nice. And then the alignment and profile information is all here. So for example, if I wanted to see a profile view of my turnpike connector, I can go ahead and create that. And there's the profile view. And I could begin my detailed design from here, tweaking the profile, defining the intersections, getting all that exactly defined the way I want it, and moving on to, documentation as well, plan and profile sheets, all that stuff. So that's the beauty of being able to move this data from InfraWorks to Civil 3D so readily. So I'm about out of time. What I'll do is I'll switch back to my PowerPoint here and remind you guys that, and I want to make sure I hit all my bullet points. So let me check that real quick. And at least talk about one if I missed it. Yeah, we covered widening, ramps, and overpasses. I didn't do custom roadside elements, so let's do that really quick. So a good place for a custom roadside element would maybe be this curve right here. That looks like a pretty sharp curve. We don't want someone taking that too fast to end up hitting oncoming traffic down here. So I'm going to click the road and right click and insert a decoration or place decoration. And we've got these really handy parametric objects up here. So, and to get to the parametric models, you're probably going to be set to maybe this 3D models or both of them. Just filter out 3D models, and now all I see are parametric models. So now I can pick this really handy dandy guardrail here, drop that in, and what's nice about these is they're customizable. So right now it's saying the length of the rail, I think, is 10 feet, something like that. The spacing is 32 feet. That's why they're so far apart. I'm going to bump this down to 8. I'm going to tell it and I'm doing this really quick because I'm out of time here. I'm going to tell it I want to tilt them so they match up nicely. And maybe because it's such a sharp curve, I'll do them a little shorter. So right now the length is 8. Let's go to 4 feet with a spacing of 4 feet. And because this is such a sharp curve and heavily traveled area, I want to have more than one rail. So I'm going to make this 3 rails. So that's just one example of the custom roadside elements that you can build. And if I'm going to need 3 rails, I'm going to need a taller post as well, which I have the control over that too. All right. So that covers all of the bullet points that I had in the description for you. Just a final reminder that our next webcast will be on April 18th from 12 to 1. We'll be hearing from Dave and Sarah about what's new in Civil 3D and InfraWorks. I want to thank you all for giving me and Elliot an hour of your time today. I hope you picked up lots of good tips and tricks and good ideas about how you can leverage the roadway design tools in InfraWorks. And we hope to see you again in 2 weeks for the What's New webcast. It's going to be really exciting to hear the news about what's coming. Thanks again, and enjoy the rest of your week.